Every adopted person dreams of finding their roots, of understanding where they came from. But he spent decades looking for his birth parents, hoping for answers. What he found wasn't just a family, but a revelation that nobody, not even he, could have imagined. This isn't just a reunion story. It's a dramatic uncovering of a hidden truth that will have you on the edge of your seat. You won't believe the shocking twist that emerged from his search. He always knew he was adopted. It wasn't a secret. His parents told him when he was 10, sitting at the edge of his bed on a quiet Sunday afternoon. They'd said it softly, like breaking glass wrapped in cloth, trying not to hurt him, but knowing it would change things. He remembered staring at the carpet, tracing the pattern with his finger. As the word adopted echoed through his head, they assured him he was loved, that he was theirs in every way that mattered. And he believed them, for a while. But as the years passed, something inside him grew restless. He couldn't explain it. A kind of ache for answers, faces he'd never seen, stories he'd never been told. It wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about belonging. By the time he turned 35, that ache had become unbearable. Every birthday felt incomplete, like a song missing its final note. He'd look in the mirror and wonder, whose eyes are these? Whose smile? What kind of people brought me into this world? And why did they let me go? That's when he decided he was done wondering. He was going to find them. The search began with paperwork, endless forms, phone calls, and polite but unhelpful replies from agencies that guarded information, like state secrets. He requested access to his adoption records, denied. He wrote letters, made visits, sat in cold waiting rooms under flickering fluorescent lights. Most days ended the same way, with nothing but frustration and the dull hum of exhaustion in his chest. Still, he refused to quit. He spent nights scrolling through online forums, searching names, connecting with distant relatives through DNA databases. Every new message wrought a flicker of hope. Every silence hit like a gut punch. He told no one what he was doing, not his friends, not even his adoptive parents. It wasn't because he was ashamed, it was because he didn't want to hurt them. They'd given him everything: love, stability, a home. But the truth, he needed something they couldn't give. Weeks turned into months, then years. At one point, he almost gave up. He deleted his search profiles, boxed up his documents, and told himself some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. But life has a way of whispering when you least expect it. One night, while cleaning out his attic, he found an old envelope wedged between two boxes, yellowed paper, faded ink. A note from the adoption agency dated 1988. Mentioned a transfer caseworker named L. Matthews. Name he'd never seen before. Something about that detail hooked him, small but specific. He decided to start again, from that single thread. He tracked down old employment records, made calls, even contacted retired staff members. Most didn't remember. One did. A soft voice over the phone said, "I think I remember that case. The boy was given up under unusual circumstances." His heart pounded. "What do you mean?" he asked, but the woman hesitated. "There were complications," she said quietly. "Not everything was properly recorded." That was all she'd say before hanging up that night. He couldn't sleep. He replayed her words again and again. Unusual circumstances. He felt it in his gut. There was more to this story than simple abandonment. Something had been buried. He went back to the agency the next morning, armed with the name and the date. The clerk at the front desk gave him the usual bureaucratic smile. "I'm sorry, sir, those files are sealed." But he didn't move. He just stood there, eyes steady, voice low. "I'm not leaving until I know the truth." Something in his tone made the clerk pause. Maybe pity, maybe guilt. After a long moment, she leaned forward and whispered, "Check the archives. Basement level, file room 3. You didn't hear that from me." The basement was colder than he expected, smelled like dust and damp paper. Rows of metal shelves stretched into the dark, each stacked with boxes marked in fading ink. He searched for hours, hands trembling, until finally he found a thin folder, his name printed across the top in block letters. He opened it carefully. Inside, a birth certificate, partially redacted, a few notes scrawled in the margins, and one phrase circled twice in red pen. "Do not disclose to adoptive family." His breath caught. What did that mean? Why would something about him be hidden from them? He turned the page. At the bottom of the document was a line that made his stomach twist. Mother listed, confidential, father-unknown. But beside it, in faint pencil, someone had written, biological connection confirmed, review pending. He sat there for a long time, staring at those words. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he wanted the answers anymore, because now, it felt like the truth might be worse than the mystery still. He knew there was no turning back. He closed the folder, tucked it under his arm, and walked out of the building into the bright afternoon sun. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. He was going to find out who his parents were, no matter what it cost. And somewhere deep down, a voice whispered, "You're not ready for what you're about to learn." He didn't tell anyone about the folder, not his parents, not his friends, not even his girlfriend, who had started to notice the way his thoughts seemed far away lately. He told himself it was better that way, less explaining, less worrying others about something he didn't fully understand himself, but the truth was he didn't know how to say it out loud. How do you explain finding a note that suggests your life might be built on a secret? The folder sat on his desk for days. He'd glance at it every time he passed the room, feel the weight of it like something alive. Eventually, curiosity won. He opened it again. This time, he noticed a faint carbon imprint bleeding through the back of the page. Someone had written something, then torn the top sheet away. He tilted it under the lamp. The faint outline of a few words emerged. 2 names. One of them matched the caseworker Rel Matthews, the other, a partial signature, unreadable except for the last few letters. Son. That was the first real clue. He started digging again, this time with more focus. He went through public archives, social records, even obituaries. Every lead was a thread, and he pulled on each one until it frayed. Some lead nowhere, but one led to a small town 3 hours away. Near the coast, a woman named Linda Matthews had worked as a social services officer there in the late 80s. She'd retired years ago, still alive, according to the records. He didn't hesitate. Next morning, he was in his car before sunrise, the folder sitting in the passenger seat like a silent passenger. The road stretched endlessly ahead, pale dawn light washing over the horizon. He drove with the radio off, lost in thought. What if she didn't remember him? What if she refused to talk? And what if she told him something he wasn't ready to hear? He pushed the thought aside. He needed to know. By the time he reached the town, the air had that briny, sea-worn smell. Linda lived in a small white cottage on the edge of a hill, her garden blooming with lavender and wild roses. He stood at her gate for a full minute before he found courage to knock. The door creaked open. She was older, now gray hair, gentle eyes, a cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. "Can I help you?" she asked. He took a breath. "My name's Daniel," he said quietly. "I think you handled my adoption case in 1988. Her eyes widened. For a split second, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Then she composed herself, motioned for him to come in. Inside, the air smelled like tea and old wood. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if measuring every word before she spoke. "I remember you," she said finally. "You were a difficult case. There were complications." Daniel leaned forward. "What kind of complications?" Linda hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. "Your adoption wasn't straightforward. There were discrepancies in the records. I tried to correct them, but I was told to leave it alone." "By who?" he asked. She met his eyes. Her voice dropped. "By your biological mother." The room went still. "My mother," Linda nodded. "She insisted that no contact be made. She was frightened, said she was protecting you." Daniel's chest tightened. "Protecting me from what?" Linda hesitated again, then shook her head. "I don't know. She disappeared soon after. Never responded to follow-ups, but she left a note." She rose from her chair and went to a cabinet, pulling out an old metal box. Inside were faded papers, brittle with age. She sifted through them until she found a folded slip of paper tied with a blue ribbon. "I kept this," she said, handing it to him. "I wasn't supposed to." Daniel unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. It read, "Please make sure he never knows who I am. Tell them I did this for his safety. I love him, but it's better this way." No name. No signature, only the faintest smudge at the bottom, as if someone had tried to wipe away tears before the ink dried. He stared at the letter for a long time, then looked up at Linda. "You have no idea who she was." Linda sighed. "I have my suspicions, but without proof." He pressed. "What suspicions?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "There was another file linked to yours, but it was sealed under court order. Someone powerful made sure it stayed that way." "Powerful?" She nodded. "Your adoption wasn't random, Daniel. Someone wanted it handled discreetly." His pulse quickened. "Can you tell me who?" She shook her head. "I can't, not yet. But if you really want answers, go to the courthouse in ask for case file #A-7193 if it's still there." He left the cottage with a letter in his pocket and a new storm brewing inside him. The drive back felt shorter, but his mind was racing the entire way. Who was his mother protecting him from, and why did it feel like this search was starting to circle around something darker than family secrets? That night he spread everything across his kitchen table, the folder, the letter, his notes. Under the lamplight, one phrase stood out again and again. "Do not disclose." He whispered it aloud, like a challenge. Then he wrote a single line in his notebook. "Find out who sealed the file." He didn't know it yet, but that question, those 6 words, would change everything, because when he opened that file, he wouldn't just find his birth parents, he'd find a truth that would rewrite his entire life. Asterisk. The courthouse in Windmere looked nothing like the place he'd imagined. No marble halls, no grand staircase. Just a squat, aging building with peeling paint and a broken clock that hadn't worked in years. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A young clerk at the front desk looked up when Daniel approached. He slid a folded note across the counter. Linda's handwriting, a quiet referral in ink. "I'm looking for an archived adoption record," he said. Case file number A7193. The clerk frowned. Those are sealed under state protection. I know, he said calmly, but I was told someone might authorize access. The clerk hesitated, eyeing him, then disappeared into the back room. Daniel waited. The air felt thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. When the clerk returned, he was holding a manila envelope, his voice lower now. 15 minutes. In that room, he said, pointing to a narrow door. And be careful what you're looking for. Daniel sat at the wooden table, heart pounding as he opened the envelope. Inside photocopies, handwritten notes, an old photograph of a hospital room. His name appeared on the top of several pages, alongside another Eleanor West. He froze. The name meant nothing to him, but something about it, something in the handwriting felt hauntingly familiar. At the bottom of one page, a typed note. Mother, Eleanor West, age 22. Father, sealed by request of private counsel. Then another line, added later in handwriting that didn't match the rest. Cross-reference with case file hashtag B-7193. Same paternal link. Daniel whispered the words to himself. Same paternal link. 2 case files. 2 children. Same father. He sat back, the air draining from his lungs. Did that mean he wasn't an only child? The next step felt inevitable. He requested the connected file hashtag B-7193, but it was missing. The clerk searched, frowned, and finally said, that one's been withdrawn. Private custody order. By who? She shrugged. Only a judge can tell you that. Hours later, Daniel was sitting across from Judge Emerson, an older man with sharp eyes and a heavy sigh that came from years of paperwork and quiet secrets. Mr. Hale, the judge said, glancing at the documents. You've opened quite an old wound here. I just want to know the truth. The judge leaned back. You're entitled to that much, I suppose. He opened his drawer, pulled out a second folder and placed it on the desk. This is the sister file, he said quietly. It's been sealed for over 3 decades. Sister file? Daniel repeated. The judge nodded once. Yes, because the other child was your sister. The room tilted for a moment. A sister. All these years. Someone out there connected to him by blood had been living another life, the judge continued. She was adopted by a different family, under different circumstances. The biological father requested separation. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Can I know her name? The judge hesitated, then finally slid the file forward. Her name is Anna Lawson. He spent the next 2 days replaying that name over and over. Anna. It felt both foreign and intimate. He found her through a genealogy website, a profile, a location, a single photo. She was 34, lived just 2 towns away. Her face, there was no denying it, the same eyes, the same half smile. He stared at the screen for a long time before finally typing a message. Hi, my name is Daniel Hale. I think we might be related. He hit send, immediately regretted it. The message felt too simple, too heavy. What do you even say to a sister you've never met? The reply came hours later. I was wondering when you'd find me. They met in a cafe off Main Street, a quiet place with wooden tables and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. When she walked in, he knew immediately the resemblance was undeniable. Same eyes, same nervous way of brushing a strand of hair behind the ear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she smiled faintly. You really do look like him. Like who? Daniel asked. She hesitated. Our father. His throat went dry. You know who he is? Anna nodded slowly. I do, but it's complicated. They sat for hours. She told him about her childhood, her adoptive parents, the letters she once found but wasn't supposed to read. Letters from their biological mother, Eleanor, each one full of guilt, apology, and something darker left unsaid. Did she ever mention him? Daniel asked quietly. Anna looked down at her coffee. She did. Once, said he was someone she could never name. Someone dangerous. The word dangerous hung between them like static in the air. When they left the cafe, dusk was falling. The streetlights flickered on, and Daniel walked her to her car. I need to know, he said. Who was he? She looked at him, torn, uncertain. Daniel, I don't think you're ready to hear this yet. He stepped closer. Please, after everything I've found, just tell me. Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. Our father wasn't just some man who walked away. He's still alive, and he's not who you think. Daniel froze. What are you saying? She opened her purse, pulled out an old photograph. It was faded, creased down the middle. In a tar man in his 40s, standing in front of a courthouse. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He knew that face. It was the same man who'd handed him the adoption file that morning. Judge Emerson. His breath caught. The world seemed to tilt again, the sounds of the street fading into nothing. Anna looked at him, eyes wide and wet. I think he's been keeping tabs on us our whole lives, she whispered. And that's not even the worst part. Daniel didn't speak. Couldn't he look down at the photograph again? Then up at the courthouse in the distance, its lights glowing faintly. Through the fog. Everything inside him screamed to turn back, but he knew he wouldn't. He had to know the rest. Whatever it was, he was walking straight into it. The photograph burned in his hand. Judge Emerson, his supposed ally, the man who'd handed him his own adoption file, wasn't just a name in the system. He was family. Daniel barely remembered the drive home. Rain hammered the windshield, streetlights smearing into streaks of gold and gray. Every thought was a collision, questions, disbelief, flashes of memory that suddenly didn't fit anymore. He sat in his car outside his apartment for nearly an hour before going inside. He spread everything across the table again. Letters, the photo Anna had given him. This time, he noticed something he'd missed before. On the back of the photo, a date, and beneath it, a name in faded INKE West. Custody hearing. Eleanor West, his mother, standing in front of the same courthouse that the same day the judge had presided. He felt the air leave his lungs. Judge Emerson hadn't just known his mother, he'd ruled on her case. The next morning, Daniel went back to the courthouse. He didn't bother with appointments or polite requests this time. He marched straight into Emerson's office. The judge was seated behind his desk, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up, startled but calm. "Mr. Hell, you shouldn't be here." Daniel tossed the photograph onto the desk. "Then maybe you should explain this." Emerson stared at it for a moment, then leaned back slowly, removing his glasses. "I was wondering when this would come up," he said quietly. Daniel's voice was sharp. "You knew my mother. You handled her case. You knew everything." The judge sighed, long and heavy. "Yes, I knew her." His eyes drifted toward the window. "She was complicated." Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears. "Complicated? You call abandoning 2 kids complicated?" Emerson looked up, his expression tightening. "She didn't abandon you. She was forced to give you up." Daniel frowned. "Forced? By who?" Emerson hesitated just for a heartbeat too long. "By me," he said finally. The words hit like a punch. Daniel's voice cracked. "You what?" Emerson's eyes dropped to his hands. "Because I was your father." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his heartbeat thunder in his ears. "You're lying." "I wish I were." Emerson's voice was low, tired. "Eleanor and it was a mistake. I was married then, a young prosecutor, on the rise. She was a law clerk in my office. We were reckless. When she got pregnant, everything spiraled." Daniel stared at him, disbelief mixing with rage. "You hid me. You sealed my life away to protect your career." Emerson didn't look at him. "I thought I was protecting everyone. Eleanor wanted to keep you, but my wife, my family threatened to destroy her. She left, terrified. I arranged the adoption separately so no one would trace it back." Daniel's voice trembled. "And you kept watching us for years." Emerson nodded once. "I made sure you were both safe. That's all I could do." Daniel slammed his hand against the desk. "Safe? You call this safe? We grew up not knowing who we were. You played God with our lives." The judge flinched but said nothing. For a moment, the only sound was the rain outside, tapping against the glass like a clock counting down to something inevitable. Daniel turned toward the door, then stopped. "You could have told me the truth years ago." Emerson's voice followed him, soft but raw. "I almost did. When your adoptive mother fell ill, I came close. But you were happy, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy that illusion." Daniel looked back at him, his eyes full of a grief he couldn't name. "You didn't protect me. You just buried the truth." He left the office without another word. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cold, heavy with that sharp, post-storm stillness. He stood under the courthouse steps trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. His father, a man who'd spent decades sitting behind a bench, passing judgment on others while his own life was built on a lie. The weight of it was unbearable. That evening, he drove to Anna's apartment. She opened the door before he even knocked. She'd been crying. "I called him," she said. "He told me." Daniel nodded silently. They sat on a couch, neither speaking for a long time. Finally, Anna whispered, "He ruined her. You know, our mother. She tried to rebuild her life, but she never stopped looking over her shoulder. I think she was afraid he'd take us back." Daniel looked at her, his voice hollow. "And now he wants forgiveness." Anna shook her head. "He doesn't deserve it." But late that night, when Daniel was alone again, he found himself staring at the letter from his mother, the one that said, "I did this for his safety." Her words took on a new meaning now. She wasn't protecting him from the world. She was protecting him from his father. He realized then how much she must have loved him to disappear, to surrender everything's just, to keep him safe from a man powerful enough to erase the truth. Tears blurred his vision. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, just a deep, aching sadness for everything they'd all lost. But the story wasn't finished, because 2 days later, a letter arrived at his doorstep. No return address, just his name, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Inside one line. Unsigned, "There's something else you don't know about your mother. Meet me tomorrow. Alone." Daniel read it twice. The handwriting was old, elegant, familiar. It was his father's asterisk. The letter felt heavier than paper. He turned it over again and again, tracing the handwriting with his thumb. His father wanted to meet alone. No time, no place, just that single, cryptic sentence. He barely slept that night. The ceiling seemed to breathe with him, every tick of the clock cutting deeper into his nerves. By morning, he'd already decided. Whatever waited on the other side of this, he needed to face it. At sunrise, another envelope appeared. It slipped under his door. No knock. No sound. Inside, a small card. Old train depot. 7 p.m. Don't bring anyone. The station was abandoned decades ago. Broken windows. Rusted rails swallowed by weeds. When Daniel stepped out of his car, the air smelled like rain and iron. The sun was bleeding out behind the trees, turning everything golden gray. He walked inside. The echoes of his footsteps followed him through the hollow building. Then he saw a figure sitting on a bench near the far end. Judge Emerson, his coat folded neatly beside him. You came, the old man said. Daniel stayed standing. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. Emerson's voice was softer this time. But there's something I need you to know before I go. Daniel frowned. Before you go, the judge nodded. I'm dying, Daniel Kenser. 6 months, maybe less. I didn't call you here for forgiveness. I called you because there's still one truth left about your mother. Daniel said nothing. The sound of wind through the broken glass filled the silence. Emerson continued, his voice steady but heavy. She didn't die in that car accident, like the reports said. That was my doing. I had the records falsified. Daniel's chest tightened. What are you saying? She wanted to come forward. She was going to tell the press what I'd done, expose everything. My wife had just left me. The firm was crumbling, and if she'd spoken I would have lost everything. So I made her disappear. Daniel's stomach dropped. You know, Emerson cut in. Not like that. I didn't kill her. She begged me to let her start over. So I used my contacts to erase her record. She left the country. New name, new life. Daniel's voice was raw. You're telling me she's alive? Emerson nodded slowly. She's been living in northern Canada for years. She wrote you letters every birthday until she thought it would only reopen wounds. She asked me to keep them until you were ready. He reached into his coat and handed over a small bundle of envelopes tied with ribbon. Daniel's hands trembled as he took them. The oldest one, dated 1992. The handwriting was unmistakable. That same careful script from the letter Linda had saved all those years ago. He opened it. My dear boy, I think of you every day. I hope you found kindness where I could not stay. If this ever reaches you, know that leaving wasn't my choice. It was the only way to keep you safe. The ink had bled slightly from tears. Long dried dot. Daniel looked up, voice shaking. Why now? Why tell me this after all these years? Emerson's eyes glistened. Because I can't leave this world with more lies than I've already told. You deserve to know she's still out there. That she loved you more than I ever could understand. Daniel felt everything all at once. Rage, grief, disbelief, relief. It was too much to hold. He took a slow breath, forcing the words out. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't expect you to, Emerson said softly. But I hope you'll find her. She's waiting. A week later, Daniel stood at a small post office in a snow-covered town in northern Canada. He had written only one line on the envelope he carried. To Eleanor West from your son. He handed it to the clerk and stepped back outside. The cold air stung his face, but he felt lighter. He didn't know if she'd respond. Didn't know if she'd even want to see him after so many years of silence, but for the first time, the uncertainty didn't scare him. He was no longer searching for where he came from. He was finally beginning to understand who he was. Months passed, spring melted into summer, then one afternoon, a letter arrived, the return address written in that same steady, familiar script. He sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking as he opened it. Inside, my dear Daniel, I never thought I'd get the chance to write this again. I'm sorry for the years that were stolen from us. I was young, frightened, and trapped between choices that never should have existed. But you were never unwanted. You were my reason to keep breathing. If you're ready, I'd like to see you at the place where it all began. No signature needed, he knew. 2 weeks later, Daniel found himself back in that coastal town, the one where Linda's lavender garden still swayed in the breeze, and there by the cliffs overlooking the sea, stood a woman in her 50s, hair streaked with silver, eyes that mirrored his own. She turned as he approached. Neither spoke. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 2 lives, 2 decades, and 1,000 unspoken words between them. Then she whispered, voice trembling, you found me. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I think you were never really lost. She stepped forward, reached out, and held him like a mother who had waited a lifetime for that single moment. The sound of the ocean filled the air, endless, forgiving, alive. Later that evening, as they sat watching the sun sink into the horizon, she told him everything. About the threats, that fear, the night she left under a new name, how she'd followed his life from afar, quietly, anonymously, but always there. When she finished, Daniel simply said, you don't owe me explanations anymore. She smiled faintly. Maybe not, but you deserve to know, love didn't abandon you. It just hid until it was safe to come back. As the sky deepened into twilight, Daniel realized something. His past wasn't a curse, it was a compass. Every lie, every wound, had led him here to truth, to peace, to understanding. He wasn't defined by who left, or who hid the truth. He was defined by what he chose to do with it. He reached into his pocket, feeling the bundle of old letters. For the first time, They didn't feel like weights, they felt like roots. The camera would linger their mother and son, sitting by the sea, bathed in gold light, silent. But hold on, because sometimes the real revelation isn't the secret that was hidden, it's discovering that even in the shadows of betrayal, love can survive, and when it finally steps into the light, it changes everything. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free right away. It shakes you, breaks you, and forces you to rebuild from the ground up. But in that rebuilding, you find who you really are. Daniel's story wasn't about finding his parents, it was about finding himself. And maybe that's what every search is. In the end, not for people, but for meaning. If this story hit you somewhere deep, take a moment to think about the people who shaped your life, the ones who stayed, the ones who left, and the ones you're still trying to understand. And if you want more stories that remind you how fragile and powerful truth can be, make sure you hit subscribe, tap the bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me this: would you want to know everything about your past, even if the truth changed everything you believed about yourself? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.